Alright, welcome back everybody. As you can see, the car is down, off the jack stands. I have been driving it. If you've been following last week's video, did the airline repair after that popped on the header. Made me think a little bit that I should probably inspect everything on this. It's been several months now since I finished doing the air ride on it. And I'm like, it's probably a good time now. Maybe that was just a little hint to go over everything. Check all the welds, check all the components, all the shock brackets, every little piece that I handmade, just to go over all that. Make sure there's no like stress or anything that's kind of sticking out of the ordinary that may lead to like some sort of failure in the future. So pretty much that's all we're gonna do today. We're gonna look at everything up close, trace the lines all the way back, make sure nothing's rubbing or chafing. We're also going to check the air spring or airbag, make sure it's not rubbing in the front control arm mainly, or make sure nothing's hitting in the back, like the rear tie rods come pretty close to the rear air springs in the rear. So just stuff like that, just general stuff. After you do any big project like that, you really need to kind of go back through it. I mean, because how many times you like do something, you go on the road and something pops off, or you know, it's just normal. I mean, when you're messing around with your car, you're building something, these things happen. So it's just good to take that little extra precaution and just make sure that you're safe before you hit the road. So we're gonna go ahead and start that now.
First I'm just gonna look around the line here, making sure there's no rubbing around the brake line there, and the frame section there. It's kind of sitting on a little bit, but it looks like it's all right. Then even I'm gonna peek down inside that spring cup area in the control arm. Make sure there's no rubbing down in there. There's like one little spot that I saw, but it didn't look that bad, but it's something to keep an eye on down there. I'm also going to look, inspect on my welds and stuff like that too. Yeah, everything seems to look pretty decent. Back here where I welded that plate, seems to look fine. I'll try to get in here and see what the air spring looks like at the bottom side. Alright, so this looks pretty decent. So now we just follow the airline back. I'm also going to try to zoom in on my lower shock mount here too, because that tab on either side is welded on, and that bolt is also bolted through the control arm. I'm going to put a wrench on all this stuff too, just to double check. But all the welds are holding up, so that's a good sign. Alright, so that's where I put the heat shield on the airline by the header. And then this runs along the frame rail here. So I'm just going to check all these points where it touches anything and make sure there's no chafing or anything that looks like I need to make a note of in the future. As long as it's secure and doesn't vibrate a lot, it's not really going to wear through. So it looks good along here, so I'm going to hop on the back. Alright, so now the back of the car, I have that ran up pretty tight up in the frame rail there. It goes on top of like the shock mount there. All that looks pretty good. None of that's moving around. There's no spots where it's rubbing or touching anything too aggressive. And then that'll go back behind there. Alright, so I'm looking back here at the bag mount. The line looks good up there. Nothing's really rubbing on anything. And I'm just looking at the welds on there. My toe link set up. Looks good. Even though it's kind of close to the air spring there, once it's at ride height and everything, there's enough clearance. I actually was just playing around with that when I was on the alignment rack. Just double checking, making sure nothing rubs there. Because it is tight up in there. But, you know, ride height and lower and down, it doesn't touch it. It's when you're aired completely up, it gets really close. But that's kind of normal and what to expect with this setup. So I'm just looking at all this stuff. Looking at any kind of like stress area that looks bizarre, like paint flaking or anything like that. But it looks good. So I'm happy with the way that's holding up. It's actually holding up really nice. And then I look at my shock mount too. Where the bolt goes through, like on the other side, there's like a little paint flaking from where I like over tightened it a little bit. But that's just kind of normal from the stress of the bolt like pulling in on the metal. But other than that, all the welds look good. So it's been a little bit now, so it's kind of a good time to look at all this stuff. And then while we're underneath here, we'll look at some of these lines. All right, now I'm on the passenger side rear. Just looking for anything that looks a little different. Same thing there. You can see that it's kind of looks tight, but plenty of room. And down here it doesn't really hit at all. Oh, this looks pretty good too. No bending or tweaking or anything, which is nice. Same thing with the shock mount. Looks pretty good. All right, so there's the line. The other side of the top bag mount looks good still. Shock. And then there's the shock mount at the bottom. You can see where that paint is kind of crinkled. That was like that when I tightened the bolt down too tight. Just like it happened on the other side, but still holding up good. All right, some underneath, passenger rear. I did have this like rubber grommet here to keep the airline from rubbing on the frame. That's still there and holding up. It's going along the frame rail here. And back to my fitting there that I put in for the repair of the line. And now you can see that tucks up that way because before it went up right over here where the fuel lines were. So over there, it's a lot safer. Here it comes around here now in the new spot. Back down in there. I ended up moving it on the inside of the brake line. That's where I had, or the brake hose, that's where I had it originally. And in the last video I had it wrapped around the other side. It was kind of tight to the tire, still had like a half an inch when it was like full turned. But I just decided to put it in there. I was worried about it kind of kinking, but it's holding up pretty good. So. And I did kind of already inspect this control arm since the little incident. Everything's holding up. I'll try to peek down in there. Shock mount looks good. And then just, so he's got good spacing around the air spring there. But obviously this is fully extended, it's not compressed, but it doesn't show any signs of wear or anything. I'm also just going to peek in here, inspect my wiring. There's nothing really going to go wrong there, but just to make sure. I haven't looked at any of this stuff since I put it in. So. Alright. So I am still waiting to hear back from Airlift about my manifold with that slow leak. But other than that, I mean, it's been fine. It hasn't had any more issues. Yep, everything seems fine.
Alright, so that'll do it for today's video. So now that everything is inspected and looking safe and nothing's rubbing, I feel good enough to go out, drive the car, and not worry about anything happening again, at least not for now. Maybe in a couple months something will break again, but that's just car building. So if you enjoyed the video, press like, subscribe. Thanks for watching.